Hi, everyone. Let's get started. It's 12:05. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Dominique Brossard, professor and chair in the Department of Life Sciences Communication and organizing the LSC Colloquium this semester. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Fanuel Muindi, who's a neuroscientist turned civic science scholar and activist. Fanuel is the co-founder of the SAI Resident Collective. I won't tell you much about it because he's going to talk about it, but I will tell you that it is a community of scholars and social entrepreneurs who are building a next generation of civic science initiatives. So please join me in welcoming Fanuel.
Thank you. Can you hear me? You can hear me? Yep. Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much, Dominique, and everybody else for coming today and the invitation. So I have about like 25, 30 minutes of talking, hopefully shorter, so we can get into conversation. I really love just engaging with you all, and this is kind of cool that you guys are so high up there, and I'm like, so if you all were to look at my CV, see if this works, this is what you would see. This linear thing, I've just jumped from one ship to the next, no problems there, fair weather and all that stuff. But in reality, things are more like this. This is what, my life so far has been, and it's been a mixed bag of twists and turns, and I hope some of you can relate. And I can tell with you, I'm happy to tell you that this is normal. So don't freak out if this is happening to you right now. You're looking ahead, you don't know what's going to be the left turn or right turn. This is normal, and I'm still doing this, okay, even at this juncture. So I'm going to take you on a journey through some of these twists and turns and tell you sort of what I've learned and what I'm doing right now towards my work. So, and it goes back to Tanzania. That's where I was born. That's where I'm from originally. Went to the UK, did my high school there, and then the US, lived a bunch of places that I'll briefly talk about. And I show you this because this is where, for me, the question about who are you, and what are you doing in this space comes up a lot when you start doing this sort of massive moves across continents. I got these questions when I was in the UK. Of course, I looked very different there, super tall, among other things, but the language, the food, the culture, everything was different. Same thing happened going to the South in Georgia. I went to Morehouse College as an undergrad there. Same thing. And even California, too. It was different enough to get those questions. And I got those questions also professionally. And so at Stanford, I was really fixated with this question, the question about how does the brain modulate sleep and wake transitions. I was a circadian biologist in training in undergrad, and so this question has been bothering me. And so the retinal hypothalamic tract is what I looked at for my graduate studies. And I was counting the years of how long I've been looking at this, for about 10 years or so. And it was a lot of fun, I'll tell you right now. It was the earliest days of optogenetics. So Carl Deiseroth at Stanford was doing some of this work. He was literally just in the next building. So it was kind of cool just to see that work being churned out and attending some of their lab meetings and seeing that live. And so Craig Heller, my advisor, really played a crucial role in giving me free rein to look at these questions, and I was there for about 5-6 years, and I got in. I thought to myself, how the hell am I going to get out? But time flies by. So for those of you who are doing, PhD, masters, time flies. Time really does fly. If you're curious about the work, you can read those publications there. So I packed my bags at that point in time. I had a two-body problem. My wife was in Boston at that time, and so I moved to Boston, okay? And so the question there I was curious about was really looking at anesthesia and how we should redesign the state of anesthesia. You can see the link, I hope, from looking at sleep and wake transitions to anesthesia. Emery Brown was my advisor there, and he was an anesthesiologist / statistician, MD, PhD trained. And so another boundary spanner. So you hear me use that word, boundary spanner. And so he was fusing the fields. He was going to the OR, seeing what's happening in the OR, and coming back to the lab and asking questions of us, the basic scientists, say, hey, can we look at this at the neurocircuit level? And so I've spent a lot of time, poking around different areas, using optogenetics, electrical stimulation, what have you, and looking what the animals, in this case mice, were doing and responding. And so a lot of fun. 3 years there at MIT, super cold, coming from California, yikes. but I survived, and I was co-mentored by Krista Van Dort and Matt Wilson there. Fantastic mentoring team. 3 advisors, so if you guys want to ask me questions later about how do we manage 3 advisors, do ask me that as well. And so the question, though, that kept bugging me throughout my transition and my time was this: what is the civic nature of science? And I'm phrasing it here this way. It wasn't clear to me like this when I was going through this, okay? I was asking sort of other weird questions. But now looking back, this is really the fundamental question that now continues to drive me in my work today. And you can switch the word civic with public. So I can rephrase that again. What is the public nature of science? And we can get into conversation about what that means and so forth. But the key word there is this combination here, civic science. You've heard, I hope in your mind you're asking, what on earth is this thing? And so I want to take a few slides here just to share those concepts in greater detail. So Dietrich, you should remember this because you wrote part of this, co-wrote this. So this was a publication, The Civic Science Imperative, published with Elizabeth Christopherson, Dietrich, and Brooke Smith. And in there, talking about civic science, they describe it as the broad public engagement with issues that arise at the many intersections between science and society. You can flip around science and society with scientific enterprise and local communities, have you. And so this is, if you start reading the publications, everybody's characterizing this term in various different ways. And so I want to show you those various ways. If you read the more recent, so by the way, this was published in 2018, this version here. This was published just last year, late last year, the Civic Science Career Roadmap, which I encourage you to check out. I sent Julia the PDF or the link to this if you want to view later. And so in there, when they talk about the civic science professionals, they say they're dedicated to listening and co-creating, grounded in a commitment to broadening who informs research, who participates in research, who decides about its use and applications, and who benefits from its power and promise. They go in great detail in there, a lot of insights, quotes that I encourage you to check out of folk that are in that boundary spanning space of being civic science professionals, okay, boundary spanning. And so I wanted to show you a take from one professor from Stellenbosch University who joined me recently in describing what civic science means to them. So this is Marina Joubert from Stellenbosch University. So have a listen. Oh, I guess the audio is not coming through. I can try and blast it.
The sound up on your laptop?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm gonna go back. Hopefully audio works because we have quite a few audio snippets that I wanted to share.
Civic science comes to life when scientists emerge from their labs and offices to engage with public audiences in dialogue about their work. It requires intentional activities. It doesn't happen by itself. You want to take your research and your knowledge into the public arena, and you want to listen to, but also learn from diverse public audiences. It is therefore about being willing to share your research, but also about being willing to listen to public audiences and giving them a voice. It is about knowing when to keep quiet and to listen to what people have to say. It's about respecting the values and ideas that you can gain from the public and a desire to understand why they feel a specific way about issues rooted in science and how they form those opinions. Scientists who walk this path are usually surprised by how they enjoy the public dialogue and the feedback they get from the public, and how this feedback can actually enrich their research and lead to new research perspectives. On top of this kind of public engagement can add credibility and validity to your research. It can make your research more responsive to society's needs, and it can make your research more visible, not only to your peers, but also to policymakers and funders. So, to become a civic scientist, my advice to young researchers would be to be on the lookout for opportunities to engage, to be on the lookout for public engagement training, and to make it a part of your identity as a researcher.
And so another way to look at this is the constellation of North Stars that civic science is trying to tackle. So this is quite a quick visual here. whether it's talking about broadening participation in STEM, policymaking, science literacy, lifelong learning. If you look in the literature, a lot of different terms being used that combine the work of civic science. So that's another way to look at it from the problem or issues point of view. Another way is to look at it from an approach. And so I love this visual from the Civic Science Fellows program that the Ritalin Foundation runs. And this was a great visual. When I saw this, I was like, yes, all these various areas that are all combined, right? They're approaching this challenge from different angles, whether it's from science communication, science policy, science journalism. We have these common elements that is driving us towards tackling all the various issues that I mentioned in the previous slide. I really like how Peter Levine is a professor at Tufts Jonathan Tisch College of Civic Life. He pushes this further and says, you know, for civic science, it's about what should we do? And the key word there is the royal we. It is not an individual endeavor, it is a combined collective endeavor. And so he pushes and says, for those who are engaged in this work, what should we do? And that is a forceful way, another way to think about it, especially with all those challenges that are there. So now go back a little bit to my postdoc days in my third year now as I'm looking at this landscape, trying to figure out what do I do next? Okay, actually it was my second year at that time. The questions were swirling and I'm trying to figure out what's next. A lot of issues that are at hand. I didn't know where the communities were. The term civic science I had actually never come across at that time. Science outreach was a term that I knew about. But the communities, the research, you know, who's doing what, where, and when, what are actionable things that I can do to add it to my own body of work so that I can have an impact on the ground, evaluation, and you can see a lot of other elements. Funding is a big one as well. How do I do this in a sustainable way? So this is really what encouraged me to start thinking more broadly about this. I started as an academic at that time. I started writing. So my postdoc advisor kind of sort of knew I was doing this, but not really. You know, we're publishing these ideas, and for those of you who kind of look back, because some of this stuff is like 10 years old, I go back and I reread it, and I'm like, wow, I actually wrote that. Sounds okay. And at times I'm like, ooh, that sounds horrible, you know? But for me, it was dibbling and dabbling in all these issues, right? And realizing that, okay, how can I create a place where others like myself, you know, others like me, boundary spanners, can come together and talk about these issues and do something about it, as Peter Levine says. So this is how the SRC was born. I do have a slide at the end of the whole name nomenclature and how it came about. For the sake of time, I will fast forward that. But at the really focus is that we are this sandbox, incubator sandbox for emerging science, civic science scholars and entrepreneurs who are building both research and entrepreneurial ventures in this space, trying to connect science and society, or better yet, the scientific enterprise and local communities more broadly. And so it is about community at the core focus. A lot of times people just want to find others in community with what they're doing, providing an infrastructure for funding. So all the residents in the collective have PI rights, if you will, and can write grants to support their own work. Professional resources, mentorship, and all of it is geared towards supporting the residents, whether they get access to interns, summer interns, and staff, and so forth. For me, it was about how do we enable and really activate these change agents that are at this interface. And so if you are curious to read more about this, we were invited recently to write a paper and talk more about the work. And so you can scan this. And by the way, there'll be quite a few QR codes. And so just have your phone ready if you're curious to have this, to scan it and read the paper later. And notice that we use the term informal science learning. The NSF that's the term from the NSF that they use versus civic science. And so if you look at the body of residents, they are working on various projects. They're scholars, they're social entrepreneurs. I encourage you to go to our website, scicollective.org, to read more. And so it's been really an exciting journey, and it's been about making connections for learning and collaborating. This is our first dinner in Boston, 2018, small group. And 2022, we grew a little bit more. And it's been really just, again, bringing people together in community and helping them form new connections and collaborations and so forth. And so that was Boston. More recently, last year, this was in Washington, D.C. This is the second hub of where quite a few residents are located. And again, it's just great to see people coming together and so forth. Fun fact, bottom left here, some of you may know who this is. This is Claire Holosevitsky. She, I believe, was a master's student here at LSC way back when, so fun fact there. So by the numbers, 26 residents so far. They have mentored around 60 plus fellows. We used to have a fellows program, if you guys are familiar with Y Combinator style, Shark Tank style, that was like a 10-week program that we hosted for graduate students in the fellows, and then the summer interns for undergraduates who get to work with residents for the summer, and they help them with their projects. As I mentioned, all the residents have PI rights, so we track very closely the success rate for their grants, and so for us, that's a major metric. Are you able to secure grants to lead your independent work? And so we are very much structured like a university department, although we are not in an academic setting. And the longest residence, as you can guess, it's myself, yours and truly, from the beginning. But we have residents every year. They renew. They can renew if they want, and most of them do renew. And so it's great to see them return every year. Here's a few snippets of profiles of those on the founder track. We have two tracks, founder track and the scholar track. And so rather than me trying to tell you all the details, please go to our website and read what they're working on. It's really kind of exciting. I wanted to play you one of the residents, Matt Wilkins. He was a postdoc at the university, Vanderbilt University, I believe. And he has this initiative called the Galactic Polymath, his own service and business that he's been growing. And so I hope the audio comes out, but here we go. This is his team.
Problem. You're doing cutting-edge research that the public doesn't understand. You're incredibly busy, and outreach takes a lot of time. The solution, Galactic Polymath, an education studio that helps you connect to the most important audience for growing STEM literacy, K-12 classrooms. So, how do we connect your research to the classroom? At Galactic Polymath, we create beautiful visuals to communicate your science, design engaging lessons around your data, analyze our data and find out for yourself, align to teacher standards and practices, help you complete outreach on a funded grant, and win grants by having stellar broader impacts, ultimately simplifying your outreach efforts. Hire us. Let's turn your research into lessons that inspire. Real research, real people, real data, real careers, real learning.
And so do check it out, GP, fantastic work that they're doing right now. The other track is a scholar track, and one of the newest residents that's joined us, she was a postdoc at NYU, and she's looking at this interface between scientists and artists, the barriers, the goals, the barriers, the opportunities to bring them together. So Ariana Zwanazi, so she's building her lab in the collective as well. And so at the core of this has been the Simons Foundation, and among other funders, this work is really impossible to do without philanthropic support. And so the Simons Foundation has been with us from the beginning, and it's just been amazing to be part of that community. It's really a community of folk that are doing fantastic work around the US, and I wanted to shine light on them because really they saw the vision of what we're trying to do and brought us in community with others that are doing this work, and it's been transformational, to say the least. So going back to the slide I showed you earlier, all the residents were sharing these challenges that were coming to me and other residents as well. And so this really gave me an idea of how can we provide access to this information in a way that is accessible, informative, and actionable. So that's the idea for my lab. It came about in the past 2 years or so. This called the Civic Science Media Lab. You saw that snippet from Marina Joubert earlier on. She was on our flagship project, the Civic Science Television Network. So think Bloomberg TV, what Bloomberg TV is doing for financial news, we want to do that for civic science. And so this is what this initiative here has been about in building all these programs with my own at the top here, questions of the day, where we engage, and I'll show you a snippet of that in a little bit. But what is really fueling all of this is what we do down here, and I'll show you some examples of that work where we're canvassing the landscape, trying to understand what's going on, and providing insight, right? And the key stakeholders here being that the practitioners and researchers who are in this space, in addition to local communities as well, but the focus is really on practitioners and researchers bringing the voices that we go about in the communities to the forefront. So what drives us is really being this investigative newsroom that's studying the civic nature of science from multiple angles and engaging stakeholders on that front. So shameless plug-in, please do go on YouTube. You can see the network there that's under construction. Really, the majority of the work has been taking place in the past year or so, and we've been expanding and growing with some grants that we received in the past year as well. And it's accessible to all, really. So whether you're a student, you're a scientist, whatever have you, we're trying to get that practitioner and researcher interface. So I want to show you what this looks like, a little quick snippet of what this network that we're building looks like. So here we go.
Viewers might be thinking, there are other outlets who do exactly what you have just described, right? What makes Club SciRY different? What was your decision process in deploying capital to do this? How do you think about impact in a way, right?
Oh, that's a great question. I
Where do you
think
see people going wrong the most? Tracy, what metric keeps you up at night? Tell us why. Why do you do this? What's the inspiration? Where does inspiration come from? And like, what kind of data are you tracking to get that? Who do you envision participating in these campaigns?
Peers and Pros project is something that I really care about deeply because we try to incorporate education and nurturing of new talent every year in a different.
Identity was important. And sometimes we think of identity like, oh, can I like find my foundation color? But it's like, can I identify myself in science as a scientist?
As per usual, we do a science policy writing training. We do some discussions, high-level topics, and hopefully we'll hear from folks who are really at a high level of experts in the field.
On the one hand, I think it has been neglected to a surprising degree, given that science communication research especially, is a field where
the main thing that we want to encourage in the world is not necessarily learning more about one topic, but it's encouraging structured curiosity.
So there's lots in there. I do encourage you to go online and see. I believe there's a new segment coming out 9 a.m. Monday to Friday. So we're trying to build that out. So the term that I've coined or trying to build around is civic science journalism. Really this interface between journalism, science, and civic life. And if you're curious to read more about it, do take a look at this piece that I wrote recently trying to define or describe what it is that we're trying to do, the civic science journalism, and being in community with others like the Rita Allen Foundation that recently funded a select group of grantees that are building these collaborative engagements. So this is between the Center for Creative Media at Montclair State University and the foundation, where they're partnering up various communities and newsrooms, for example, and other initiatives, civic science-led initiatives to tackle various issues. So here, for an example, the Planet Detroit, to form this collaboration at the intersection of journalism and community science to tell the community story of Detroit's air quality crisis. So there are like 12 of these various projects that they're funded. Do go to the Rita Allen Foundation website to learn more about those initiatives. So I believe the civic science journalism, a way structured like this, is one of the few. The Rita Allen Foundation is the few places that are formally funding it, and so it's exciting to be part of that community now. So for me, it's been about the people that have come through the lab, that have come in with the various questions that they want to ask and investigate. And so for me, it's about providing them the runway and the space to do their thing. And so now, in terms of some of the work like Heidi, who came in the lab way back when and looked at, she was very fascinated with the AZLE grant mechanism that funds a lot of the informal science engagement initiatives around the US. And so her insights were very formative in us being able to find really interesting questions and pose to various stakeholders of who we talked to. Others like Gracia Garcia Elizalde, she was a summer intern from Mexico, and she was really curious about just looking at the science engagement landscape in Mexico. So she spent the summer and some change after that looking at that and really deriving us all these interesting questions that we should be asking when we talk to stakeholders in Mexico. And so I do these expeditions every so often. I was in Bogota, Colombia a couple of years ago, spent a week where we're engaging with stakeholders in the community there about what work they're doing around civic science. And so that whole documentary is online if you want to check it out. It was really eye-opening as a big birding community in Bogota, right by the foothills of the Andes. And so just they're using that as a vehicle to engage the local community with science and so forth, and others here as well. The one recent project that I wanted to tell you as well is this project that I was able to get last year. So it was a fellowship with Research America in partnership with the Alaska Foundation, where we were looking at the landscape of training initiatives in public engagement in the US. And so this is now public, so you can go online, and actually the link will take you to the report and the dashboard itself that we created, and also the full launch, so the whole launch that we created that you can watch and hear me talk about the landscape work that we did. And so this, for me, it was a great project for the lab that we were able to take, and it allowed us to get a suite of new questions that now we're armed with when we're talking to stakeholders, and we're doing that right now with a special series, talking with training directors, training program directors, and asking them really the hard questions. I hope you could hear me in that video. I definitely do not leave things unturned. I ask them the hard questions, and if I don't understand something, I go back and say, please explain it one more time. And so it's a fun engagement with stakeholders. And for me, it's about building the trust so that they can come on and feel comfortable to answer those questions. And so it's been really eye-opening and illuminating. So there are a couple of my last slides here. There are still many challenges. As I mentioned, being a boundary spanner here it's unknown territory, right? The pathway is not well-guided. It's not, you do this, this will happen. You need to try things out, and you have to fail a lot, okay? And you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I'll repeat that, being comfortable being uncomfortable. I showed you my path from Tanzania all the way living in the UK and so forth, being super uncomfortable, okay? And I started learning that as early as I can, and I found myself always in those spaces. And so whether it's learning about how to run a nonprofit, how to start a nonprofit, funding spaces, you go to a funder, completely unknown territory, and you have to learn how to do that, right? Most of the time, there really isn't like a specific course in your training that you take. It's that initiative, that curiosity that is internal that I've used to try to do this. So a lot of unknowns, but I'm comfortable, again, being uncomfortable. And so one advice, challenge your assumptions, challenge your assumptions, challenge your assumptions, okay? Neuroscientists going into civic science, and really, I should have changed that title to like being a boundary spanner. A lot of assumptions that you need to challenge. And I think that, for me, is a lesson I continue to learn. I'm continuing to learn that. And so the journey continues. I have a lot of things, as I mentioned, to do and figure out. And along the way, I have gotten a lot of yeses. So here are some of those yeses, right, that have come along and said yes to the work that I'm doing. And I'm so thankful to all of them, especially the community at the Research America and the Alaska Foundation in the past year have been so instrumental in just letting me really be myself, okay? And I'll repeat that, being yourself in this space is critical because you're wearing multiple hats. You saw the opening slide. I have 3 things there, and I didn't talk about my Northeastern stuff, which you can ask me about, but being comfortable wearing these different hats in different spaces, right? So people can ask you, who are you? You have an answer. Some variation of it. But behind this slide, all right, is the whole suite of no's that you don't see and we don't talk about. And that's a question, if you guys are curious about which no's have I received, do ask me. There are lots of them I'm collecting in the back, okay? And so here are things you can ask me about. So this is my last slide. We can talk about the collective if you want to learn more about that. You can talk about the lab and what we're doing there. We just got a new grant and to expand the civic science journalism we're doing. I work with Research America now, the landscape, so the dashboard we released, the TISB dashboard. I can talk about the TV network as well. Do check it out and subscribe if you think it's useful for you. My show, and that's been really a lot of joy to do, the civic science journalism thing that we're developing. And I didn't talk about this at all here, but I'm happy to now, is PESH. This is a new initiative in my work, in my role as the professor of practice at Northeastern. So this is the public engagement with science hub that we're building, part of a response from the report in our training that we did recently. And that is it. So here's a suite of things you can ask me about and anything else that you guys come up with. And we have plenty, I hope, of time for Q&A. So.